Rashi mentioned the Chazal that why do we trace the pedigree of Pinchas to Aaron? As Rashi explains, because the Shvatim, they were criticizing Pinchas, or when we explained, they were classifying him as somebody who came from a background of idolatry, and that's why he killed the prince. His grandfather, since he was a grandson of Yisro, because Elozar was married to Yisro's daughter, and Yisro initially was an idolater. He fattened sheep, calves for idolatry. That's why he did what he did. So we explained yesterday. It means that's why he was able to do what he did. That since he comes from such a background where, therefore, he was able to do an act which is so extreme, an act of cruelty. But a Jew that comes from a different level of pedigree, where from both the maternal and paternal side, you couldn't behave this way. So they were trying to somehow vindicate themselves that there's no basis for guilt because he was able to do something which they couldn't do. On that, the Torah goes and traces pedigree to Aaron. No, the reason why he was able to do what he did, because he was toe-to-toe with Zimri, because Zimri was a person of status. He was a prince. Pinchas also had a princely status because his grandfather was Aaron, and Aaron was the ultimate. He was the Kohen Gadol. That's why he was able to. That's what we explained it yesterday. The Rechaim HaKodesh explains that after the Chet Egel, at a certain level, people had a claim against Aaron. Why? Aaron initially, he had gathered the gold for the Egel. And the reason why the luchas were broken. And we need a mishkan. And we had to be reinstated because Aaron had gathered the gold for the Egel. And we were actually disenfranchised. And when we were reinstated, we weren't at that same level. So why are we not at the level that initially we should have been? Because of Aaron. So the reason why we function at a second-rate level is because of Aaron. The Torah says, I want to explain you something. If not for Aaron, there wouldn't be a Pinchas. If there wouldn't be a Pinchas, there would not be a Jewish people. So therefore, you should be thankful that there was an Aaron, because if not for Aaron, there wouldn't be a Jewish people. So the Torah is tracing the pedigree of Pinchas to Aaron, that this act is directly an outgrowth of being a descendant of Aaron. So therefore, there's no claim against Aaron anymore. That's how Orach Chaim HaKodesh once explained it. That's Pinchas ben Elozar ben Aaron and Cohen. Do you realize who Pinchas is? He's a grandson of Aaron. So this act of zealotry, which is the basis why the Jewish people were not annihilated, due to Midas Adin, is due to Aaron because Aaron was his grandfather. That's the Orach Chaim HaKodesh, one interpretation. Rameir Simcha here says something beautiful. We find when Aaron passed away, it says he passed away at a certain location. So Rashi cites Chazal that they ask, he didn't pass away there. He passed away in Hara Hara. So Rashi brings to Yerushalmi that after Aaron passed away, the Gemara tells us that the clouds of glory were in the sluice of Aaron. And when the clouds dispersed, when Aaron passed away, we were attacked. And the Jew says, we're going back to Egypt. And they went back 7 travels, and the Levim went, and they went to war, and there were many families of the Levim that were killed. The initial number of families were no longer there, because when the families are counted later, there are less families counted, because there are a number of families that were killed in this battle. But the Levim, and who led the battle? Elozar led the battle. He took the Levim to battle, even though the Levim were the smallest, the minority of Klal Yisrael. But because they were returning, they went to war to bring them back. He explains it this way. Now, we find that a person very often has the characteristics of his forebears. What was the characteristic of Aaron? What was the characteristic of Elazar? The Medrash tells us that when Pinchas went to do his act of zealotry, he understood he definitely would be killed. And only because of multiple miracles, he was not killed. That means he was willing to give his life for the sake of what? Of Kiddush Hashem. To stop the Chil Hashem. Now, where do we find that characteristic? That you're willing to give up your life, your physicality, for the sake of Kiddush Hashem? We find it by Elazar Kohen. Elazar led the Leviim into battle to bring the Jews back, although the Leviim were the minority of Klal Yisrael. And he knew many families are going to be killed. Didn't make a difference. For the sake of Kiddush Hashem, you give your life. So that characteristic of putting your life in jeopardy, even though it means forfeiting your life, for the sake of Kiddush Hashem, you do that. So that characteristic that we find by Pinchas, that he inherited that characteristic from his father Elazar. What did he inherit from Aaron? Aaron, at the time of the Egel, he understood he's doing something very extremely wrong, but he said, better that I should forfeit my share in the world to come, rather than Klal Yisrael should never be forgiven. Because if I go and protest, and they kill me as they killed my nephew Chor, the Jews will never be forgiven because I'm a Kohen and a Navi. Better, I should do this and take a chance to forfeit my share in the world to come, rather than the Jewish people will never be forgiven. So he was willing to put his spiritual value on the line for the sake of Klal Yisrael, for the sake of Kiddush Hashem. We find that there was a plague after the story of Zimri. There was a plague, people were dying. And he had Zimri and Cosby on a spear. On a spear. One of the miracles, you holding on a spear, two people of that weight. One of the miracles was that Hashem kept them alive. They didn't die immediately. So everybody saw Zimri and Pinchas and Cosby on the spear alive. You go and you pierce the person that way, it's instantaneous death. Hashem kept him alive. Secondly, how do you hold a spear that with the weight that the spear shouldn't break? They should have snapped the spear. The spear remained solid. He was able to hold it. What did he do? The plague was ensuing. Pinchas goes, there's a pasuk in Tehillim, "Vayefalu Pinchas im Elokim." Hashem took God to justice. He had a claim. What was the claim? I mean, here, these people, they did this Chil Hashem, and look what I've done. And the plague is still ensuing. So he took them, and he slammed them to the ground. And he says, Hashem, here, the plague has to stop. When you go and have a claim against Hashem, you realize what you're doing. You take the chance, you're jeopardizing your share in the world to come. If you speak out of turn, at this moment, you may forfeit your share in the world to come. Pinchas, for the sake of Klal Yisrael, he was willing to forfeit a share in the world to come, for the sake of stopping the plague. So the two characteristics which he possessed, he put his life in jeopardy, his physicality, and he put his spirituality in jeopardy. One characteristic inherited from Elazar, that was the physicality, Leviim going to war, the battle, although they were the smallest tribe. And the second was that he came with a claim against Hashem. How does he continue allowing the plague to continue? That characteristic inherited from Aaron HaKohen. That's the Rameh Simcha of Vinsk. Also good days. Lochen emor. Therefore, you should say, Hini nosei lo es brisi shalom. I am giving to Pinchas my covenant of peace. So over here, if you notice, the Vav is split. And it's split. It's called Vav Katua. We'll see in a moment. I'm giving him my covenant of peace. So Rashi says, Shtelo lebris shalom. A person who is appreciative and beholding, and he has a special, he sees that person in a special light because he did this tremendous favor to him. Afkan pirush la kodesh baruch hu shlomo sov. Hashem says, you will have a partake of my peace. So over here, the Balaturim says, Lochein, the gematria mida b'mida. The word Lochein is the numerical value mida b'mida. That's measure for measure. As BC Shalom, Shlim Ksiv. The Vav Ketia. The Vav is written as if it's a Yud. I mean, you see it's a Vav because there's a continuation, but there's a split in the Vav, which normally invalidates the letter. Vergim the Kedushin, Kshu Shavim. The Rav Matono Shlema Nino Selo. I'm giving him a complete gift. Vav Matonos B'Migdosh. Yud Matonos B'Migdosh, Yud B'Medina, Ki Pinchas Elio. According to one of Chazal, Pinchas and Elio were the same person. Elio never passed away, never died. Ki Pinchas Elio, Pchein Elio Ksiv Chosevov. Elio is written with the Vav missing. Yaakov Molech. And Yaakov is written, normally Yaakov is written without a Vav. But Yaakov is written at times with a Vav. Shenotol Vav Melio, the Mashkin Achiyovo Imam Mashiach V'Yigoyel Hezbonov. He's taking the Vav from Elio to guarantee as collateral that he should come as the announcer to the Mashiach. V'zel Yogel Yaakov Yismach Yisrael. Yismach Osius Mashiach. The word Yismach and Mashiach are the same letters. Yismach Moshe Mashiach v'Yazer Havov via Elio Sholim. Ultimately, Yaakov will return the Vav to Elio, that Elio will be complete. Shalom b'Gematria Zel Mashiach. The word Shalom and is the same Gematria as Zel Mashiach. Okay? There's a word from Rabbi Simcha. He writes, a person goes to battle. And battle means you kill. When you come back, you're no longer the same person. Your sensitivity for life is no longer the same. A person who killed, a person did not kill. Now, when Pinchas killed Zimri, he just didn't kill him. The act was so vile and was an expression of anger. He avenged God's vengeance. He took it and he took the spear and he put it straight through both of them. And what he did, the way he carried them, he was like infuriated. So you would say, after doing such an act, your sensitivity to life is totally destroyed. You have no feeling for life. If you took a life at such an extreme level. So Pinchas will be a victim of this Kiddush Hashem. Tell Pinchas, I'm giving Brisi Shalom. He will have no ill effect. Although he did this act, which is vile, which is, you would say, is cruel, beyond cruelty. You have to have that cruelty to be able to behave this way. He has Brisi Shalom. He will come out unscathed. He will be fully sensitive to peace, to be able to what? To supplicate Hashem in every aspect, because he'll have that sensitivity for what? For Klal Yisrael. I was thinking, as I'm talking, the Gemara tells us that any act of what expression of deprecation is forbidden, except for the deprecation of idolatry. Except for deprecating idolatry. You're permitted to deprecate idolatry. So Rav Hutner in his Sefer Pachad Yitzchak writes why. If deprecation is considered something so negative that even in a context that you're deprecating something which is negative, you shouldn't, because once you get into that mindset of deprecation, you'll be victimized by it. So why, when it comes to deprecate idolatry, why are you permitted? So he explains that normally when you deprecate something, it's negative. It's a negative characteristic. Because you don't appreciate whatever it is. Let's say you deprecate a person. Even though the person deserves to be deprecated, but a human being, there are aspects of human being which are positive. But what about if when you deprecate avodah zarah, idolatry simultaneously, that itself is an act of sanctifying God. The reason why you deprecate it to such an extreme level is because that's you revere Hashem to such a degree. Anything else which is put on par with that, you can't tolerate. So the act of deprecation is positive. It's not negative. Therefore, that's why the only exception for deprecation where you permit it is to deprecate idolatry. That's how Rav Kalatsky explains it. So I'm saying a person acts with a level of extreme insensitivity for life, the way Pinchas killed Zimri and Kozri. Why did he do that? Because the level of Chil Hashem, which they were brought about in public, despite who he was, this is such a affront to Hashem, he cannot tolerate it. So taking out Zimri at this level is not an expression of cruelty. You know, you say a person is an enemy, he's not an enemy. But that's only an incidental. There may be good aspects to that person. But this person at this moment, what Zimri was doing, he was disgracing Hashem at such a level only to show my commitment and my negation to Hashem, that my life has no value to bring this about. So that was an act of what? Of dedication. That's a display of esteeming and revering Hashem. Cruelty is only an incidental. It's not his essence. Normally a person deprecates, what do you deprecate? What are you acting cruel? Evidently, you have that characteristic of insensitivity to life. This has nothing to do with insensitivity to life. I'll give you an example. God forbid, a person sees, this Hamas, these people kill those children, and they strangle these little children with their own bare hands, and you're there, and you see it, and God forbid it could be a person's own child. How would he react? He would kill the Hamas person in a way with a level of negative hate. Why? He's killing his child. That's not negative, that's positive. It's a positive reaction, that's not a negative reaction. Cruelty is only when it manifests itself in something which is due to a lack of sensitivity. But if there's no other way to act because of what's happening, that's not cruelty. Therefore, he doesn't need Brisi Shalom. Not like Rav Simcha. Meir Simcha says to counter the cruelty, that there should be no negative consequence. He should not be a victim of his action. He was given the confidence of peace, as if he never actually did such a vile act. I'm saying you don't need that. For that, you don't need it. Because in this context, it was the ultimate in positive. There's no negative side to
it. If Pinchas is the exemplar of the Jewish people for having demonstrated his commitment to Hashem, how are the other Jewish people who did not kill the Canaanite nations and did not kill all the Amalekite children, why would they be held to account for not perpetrating such, quote, cruelty, end quote?
I just want to bring something out. We find that Bilam, when he was commissioned to curse the Jewish people, one of the things he says was that when Yaakov blessed Shimon and Levi, it says he cursed their wrath, he did not curse them. He didn't curse them for their misbehavior. He cursed the negative characteristic they possessed. Oror apum kios. Cursed is their wrath because it's fierce. Only because they were overtaken by this level of anger, that's why they did what they did. Okay? That's why they did what they did. And Yaakov had a claim against them. You did the wrong thing. You should have consulted with me. You did not consult. Why did you do the action? Your anger overtook you. That's why you did what you did. I mean, they wiped out. They killed all the males in the community of Shem were destroyed. That's what they did. It's like an act of genocide. So the Rishonim, although what they did was permitted, it's not genocide for a number of reasons. But the timing is wrong. Here we're a small family, put us in jeopardy. So why did you act irresponsibly? Because you were overtaken with your anger. Your anger drove you to do it. It wasn't Kiddush Hashem that drove you to do that, but it's your anger that took you to do that. Therefore, he cursed their anger. He did not curse them. Okay? That's because you can ask over there also. I mean, Shimon and Levi, they wiped out the community. And yet Yaakov curses their anger. What do you mean? But they did a mitzvah. The answer is no, because the timing was not right. Although what they did was a mitzvah, they did the wrong thing at that time. Okay? Now, Zimri was a Jew. Zimri was not a god. To kill a Jew was not simple. To kill a non-Jew that he has a representation of evil. Amalek is the personification of evil. That's who they are. So since they are the personification of evil, going like Rameir Simcha, therefore destroying them does not have a negative thing, as I said earlier. That's a positive act. There's nothing negative in that. But killing Zimri, who's a Jew, who's a prince, he has a level representation of Kedusha, and unfortunately he fell to this level. To do Chil Hashem, it has a negative side to it. Therefore, Pinchas could be a victim of that, because he's expressing that vehemence, that extreme level of intolerance with a fellow Jew who's a person of status. He's a Nasi. The Canaanites, the 7 nations of Canaan, are Amalek, which they are a representation of evil. When a doctor cuts out a cancerous tumor, regardless of the pain that he's causing the patient, saving the life of the person, although the person may be incapacitated due to the surgery, but removing that is life. That's life. Destroying evil is life. You're putting the world on an even keel regarding spirituality. Zimri was a Jew, unfortunately fell out of favor. He misbehaved at a level, Chil Hashem. That has a negative side to it. It's not the equivalent of killing Amalek. It's not just killing children. Because of what they are, there's no negative side to it. Wiping out the nations of ground, there's no negative side to that. But killing Jews, there's a negative side. Some of the commentators have said that we find Be'er Dachas, a city where the majority of the city goes and becomes idolatry. You have to kill the city, all those who are idolaters, and you take all the possessions of the city and you burn them. You cannot benefit from anything. And that's pretty extreme. And over there also it says, Hashem says, I will give you peace. So they explain over there, because after killing a community of Jews, and there should not be a trace of that community, that you burn all its possessions, that's pretty extreme. But the Jews, here this is personification, this is like cutting out the cancerous tumor, the 7 nations of Canaan and Amalek. Therefore, there's nothing negative. And as a result of that, therefore, Gemara in Sanhedrin quotes a pasuk. It says, when Bilam was killed, it says, Ibud Rishoim Rina. When God destroys the evil, that's song. You sing song. You sing Shira. Moshe Rabbeinu said Ozer Shira by Kriyas Yamsuf. When the Egyptian armies were destroyed, we find by the Kriyas Yamsuf, Gemara says in Brochus, that the Malachim wanted to say Shira. Hashem says, my handiwork, a drowning, a dying, you're saying Shira? Who are you to say Shira? It's a Gemara in Brochus. So the question is, what do you mean? The Jew said Shira. So why was it a claim against the angels? You have no right to say Shira. Master Yod, they told them beyond that time of Shira. But Klal says that Shira. Because regarding us, regarding a Malach, you have no right to get involved here. You have no relevance to this. But the Jews, that for us, this is the antithesis of who we are. And we cannot coexist. That's the reason why we're singing song that Hashem allowed evil to be destroyed. Therefore, we're acknowledging Hashem for that. But Zimri is a tragedy. A Nasi goes and falls to this level, and unfortunately, he has to be taken out. This is a tragedy. I'll give you an example, a equivalent example, which is tragic. You have a child becomes a drug addict and becomes out of control. And now the child is putting the parent's life in jeopardy, and the parent has no choice but to kill his own son. Because it's either the son or the father. How would you depict that? It's tragic beyond anybody's imagination what tragedy is. But the father had no choice. but the father had to kill the son, because otherwise he would have been killed, or the rest of his family would have been killed. But it's tragic. Taking evil out is not tragic. That's positive. That's, like I said, cutting away the cancerous tumor. It was a mitzvah to destroy Midian, the Midianites, because of what they did. So Hashem originally said to Moshe, "Nekom niknas Yisrael ben Midian." You should avenge the vengeance of Yisrael, the Jews, because what they tried to destroy the Jewish people. That they commissioned Bilam ben Beor to curse you, and the story of the Balpor. Therefore, they deserve to be destroyed. Nekom nikmas Yisrael ben Midian. Moshe goes to the Jewish people and says, "Nekom nikmas Hashem ben Midian." Avenge the vengeance of Hashem ben Midian. So I mentioned Rashi over there cites the Chazal. Hashem says to Moshe, I said, avenge the vengeance of Yisrael. What are you saying? Why don't you tell them the vengeance of Hashem? So Rashi cites the Chazal, the Medrash, that Moshe responded and said, before Sinai, we didn't have the issues with the nations of the world. It's only once we became your people, now the world has a problem with us, because we represent you. So in essence, Nikmas Yisrael, the background of the story is because they cannot tolerate your existence, and we represent your existence. So in essence, it's Nikmas Hashem b'Midian. It's avenging God's glory against Midian. That's the Chazal, that's the Medrash, which Rashi brings. Over there, the Orach Chaim HaKodesh says something phenomenal. Phenomenal. When you do a mitzvah l'shma, you merit a different level of divine assistance. The battle with Midian was not just a physical battle, because we find, even as over there it says, Bilam was involved in that battle. And it says, who went to battle? Pinchas, because he was Mshuch Melchama. He was anointed as the Kohen, equivalent of a Kohen Gadol, to go to war, and he wore the 8 vestments. And he wore the tzitz, he wore the gold plate on his forehead, and when they were literally flying, they were flying in the air because they used all the sorcery. So it was a battle of the nether forces versus Kedusha. And when they would see the tzitz, it said Kodesh Lashem, they just fell out of the sky. So it was a spiritual battle. So the Orach Chaim HaKodesh explains it this way. When you're involved in a spiritual battle and you're fighting the forces of evil, the level of intent has to be purely for the sake of Hashem. If you have any self-interest in that battle, you don't merit that divine assistance. So he said like this, actually, 24,000 Jews died in the plague because of the Balpor. We were nearly destroyed because of the Balpor. So what did they try to do to us, the Midianites? They tried to destroy us. So there's a personal axe to grind each of us have. It's on a personal level. There's a personal hate. Moshe says, when you go there, you have to feel you're doing it purely for the sake of God. You're going to avenge God's vengeance. Nekom Hashem Yisrael, because if you think for your own reason and not for God's sake, you're not going to merit that divine assistance. So that's what we're talking about. The Jews at that time, they had to reach a level of understanding to internalize why we're going to this war. It's not to settle a personal score. Nothing to do with that. So when you go with that mindset, with that emotional set, and you see it through that lens, I'm not saying it's not a special level, but they had to achieve that. And Moshe is forewarning them. And if you don't achieve that, what's going to be? We're not going to win this war. Therefore, you have to have in mind, Hashem b'Midian, not Nikmas Yisrael b'Midian. There's no personal axe to grind here. This is purely for the sake of God. A person who gets angry to a point that sometimes he starts throwing vessels and breaks them, he's the equivalent of an idolater. That means your anger is overtaking your life. When your anger overtakes your life, you have no control anymore. You no longer behave like a rational person. When Pinchas killed Zimri, he had clarity, he was rational. It wasn't anger because he was angered. The negative characteristics of anger overtook his life. Shimon and Levi, it was their anger. I mean, how do you not? You have your father to speak to. How do you do such an act without consulting with your father? The answer is because their anger overtook them and they couldn't control themselves. And therefore, as I said, that's the reason why Yaakov cursed their anger, or apam kios.
Excellent. And then
You should know, it's interesting. The Medrash makes it a point. Shimon was the one who avenged Dinah's arm. The Bas Yaakov was raped. And his grandson, Zimri, brings about a Chil Hashem, which is the ultimate Chil Hashem. Levi, his grandson, who's Pinchas, brings about the ultimate Kiddush Hashem. So each one started at the same place. Look where Shimon's grandson ended up, and look where Levi's grandson ended up. Two opposite ends of the spectrum.
What evidence, if you want to call it that, do we have about Levi possessing at time zero when the 12 tribes were born, had this special capability and characteristic?
Good. Firstly, the bracha he had given Levi was indicated that Levi, even talked about at the very beginning, was special. That's number one. But secondly, it says, who named Levi? It's the pasuk says, and the third son of Leah was named Levi. So Rashi brings Chazal that Gabriel, the archangel of Hashem, had taken Levi before Hashem, and Hashem named him Levi. All the other sons, the matriarchs named their children. Levi was named by Hashem as Levi. He already was consecrated as the ultimate. He had that potential to be that most spiritual of all the tribes, Levi. That's the first indication that Levi from birth was born holy.
is it therefore
So he holds that you can use that?
You can.
And is that how people hold in Israel?
Maybe Sephardim, I'm not sure. Ashkenazim definitely do not use them.
And why? Because it looks like it's coming from a different source.
Like
That
taking
way?
the skillet, putting it in the sun, bringing it in the house, and frying an egg in the house.
I see.
There's a certain detachment.
Yeah. Interesting.
Okay. So let's see. Now this is the halom. Gimel. Geshem she'osel levashel ba'ur, kach osel levashel b'tol b'sur. Just as you cannot cook directly in fire, anything which is a derivative of fire, you're not permitted to cook. That's the case. What about you take what's a kli rishon? You have a vessel on the fire, and then the vessel itself now is absorbed. The heat is due to the fire, which heated that vessel. So the heat in the material, what is it? It's a derivative of the fire. You take it off the fire, and now you cook something in that. That's bishul daraisa. Why? Because that's called toldas, or that's a tolda, that's a derivative of fire, of human fire. But when you take that skillet that was heated in the sun and you cook indoors on that skillet, what is that heat a derivative of the sun? So that's not similar to the Mishkan. As a result of that, it's only rabbinical because a person will confuse the skillet that was heated in the sun and the skillet that was heated by fire. Rav Moshe has a famous tshuva. When they came out with the microwave, somebody asked Rav Moshe, are you permitted to use a microwave on Shabbos? Again, to put it on, they were talking about creating, with the circuit. But let's say somehow you could have the microwave on. Are you permitted to put something in the microwave to cook? Because that manner of cooking with radio waves didn't exist in the Mishkan. So are you in violation on that? So Rav Moshe says a chidush. Says something very novel. Rav Moshe says that if you use a microwave, since cooking with a microwave is now the way people cook, therefore it's an issur d'oraisa. Although in the Mishkan they didn't, the fire was not microwaves. So he says, if he cites a Rashi in Kiro that speaks about thermal heat versus human fire, he says over there that because in the Mishkan, they used fire, and that's the way people cook. Using anything but that is called non-conventional. Rashi makes that point. Therefore, it's not conventional. So meaning what the takeaway from the Mishkan is that cooking has to be conventional. So if you use another source of heat, and that other source, although it's not human fire, but that's conventional, that's an Issa Bishul. So since people don't use, let's say, don't cook in the sun, and the average, so let's say, so the Dut Shemesh is not, people still, they use fire, they cook with fire. They don't cook in sun. But since the microwave is a manner of cooking, which you cook with microwaves, and that's the way it's a manner of cooking, it's not unconventional, therefore it's Nisno rice to use a microwave on Shabbos for cooking. That's your emotion. Okay.
Rabbi, so what is the difference between Dut Shemesh and boiler?
A boiler is heated by electricity.
Yeah, that I know exactly,
Well,
but
that's
in
fire.
Yom Tov in Yom Tov there is permitted to take a shower on those hot water, which is the mibeod yom, if they were being boiled.
Are you permitted to cook a pot of water for a cup of coffee on Yom Tov? Are you permitted to prepare food on Yom Tov? Cooking is permitted. It's Ochel Nefesh.
Okay, but what is...
And if there were a,
So in Dut Shemesh, so also you can take a shower on Dut Shemesh, no? It's not...
It's separate. We're talking about Issa Bishul. We're talking about the rice level.
At the right level, okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
so if you had some kind of way to connect a solar panel or a wind turbine,
Yes?
would that be permitted?
No, that's what we're talking about. The wind turbine is like you have this mechanism on the roof which absorbs the heat, which heats the water in that particular location. The reason why you can't use the water, according to most, is although it's on the roof, but since the water that comes out of your faucet is not obvious, it's not equivalent cooking the egg in the sun, which is it's obvious, it's directly in the sunlight. Because of that, detached rabbinically, you're not permitted to use
So
that
take
water for cooking.
it to the extreme. You live in the desert of Israel. You don't use you have no electricity hookup, none. You have a tank that gets heated by the sun.
Okay.
Could you take a hot shower, assuming the water were hot?
Well, two separate things. Hot shower is a different halacha than cooking. It's a different concept. Let's say you're in the desert, in the Sahara desert. You take a frying pan, put it in the fire, in the sunlight. It's hot enough now that you could fry an egg in that pot, in that skillet. You take that skillet in your house and you want to fry the egg in the house. Rabbinically, you're permitted to do it. You're not permitted to do it. Although in the whole area, there's no source of electricity other than that sunlight. But because the location in which you're frying the egg, it's not obvious that the source of this heat is sunlight, although you know it is, because there's no electricity in that whole area, doesn't make a difference.
But to eat outside would have been okay.
Not to eat outside. Not to eat
No,
outside.
you eat directly,
You
it's
fry
direct from, yeah.
Fry directly outside would
No,
be
I meant that you're eating directly from the sun to the skillet.
okay. Now you explain what you mean.
Yeah.
Correct. That's explicit in the Gemara.
Well,
Okay. So the Mechaber says, just as you're not permitted to cook with fire, anything which is derivative of fire is bishul d'oraisa. Meeting beya b'tzad kedero, o l'shabro al suda shulchan bor kedei shetitzle. You heat a cloth, and now the cloth is hot enough that you can fry an egg on that cloth. You're not permitted. I feel told the schama now. What about a derivative of sun? Something is heated by the sun. Go tsuda shulchan b'chama. I mean, what the Mechaber saying is explicit in Gemara. You have a cloth that's heated by the sun. Also, you're not permitted. Why? Gzeira atu told us or. Because a person would use that hot cloth, which is heated by the sun, people will use a cloth that's heated by fire. V'chein osur latmina b'chol o ba'avak drochim shuchmu b'kor chama. We speak about hatmana. Hatmana is when you insulate something, right? and let's say the insulation is hot, to make, you're not permitted. Why? It's the same idea. What is the prohibition? It's cooking. But that's only if it's a derivative of fire. But if it's a derivative of the sun, take sand that's on the beach. It's so hot you burn your feet on that sand. And you take that sand and you cook an egg in that sand. So if you put the egg on the beach in the sand and it's there cooking and then you take it out, it's not a problem because it's obvious. That's directly in the sunlight. Avol bechama atzmo. But if you want to cook directly in sunlight, go litin beya bechamo litin mayim bechamo kedei sheyechmo. Mutter, it's permitted. You put a pot of fire on your windowsill, and the heat that comes on the windowsill is hot enough to cook that water. It's not a problem. It's permitted, 100% permitted. So the Gemara speaks about you have a geyser, an underground spring, and you put a pot in that hot water to cook. It's 100% permitted. So the Gemara speaks about a case, very interesting case. You had a cold stream flowing, and they diverted the water through a hot spring in a pipe, and the water came out at the other side of the pipe. So if you would have the faucet in the hot spring and you're able to take water out of the pipe, wouldn't be a question, because it's obvious. The water is being heated at this location. But if the water comes out the other side of the pipe, so where it's coming out, even though you understand, if you trace it, it's directly it's hot because it's a hot spring, yet the Gemara says it's not permitted. That because there's that level of detachment that where it comes out at the other end, it's not in the location of the hot spring, therefore rabbinically you're not permitted to do it. So there was a community that did this. So the Gemara says that pipe should be broken. That's the expression of the Gemara. You have to break the pipe, because if that's what it leads to, it's not acceptable. It's unacceptable.
Rabbi, a few Shabbos ago, I asked the Rav this question last week. So we had this congealed salad dressing, and to heat it up, we put it out on the porch.
There was a separate. That was the separate discussion. That was no lot.
Why? Why is it?
No lot. It was a muktzah issue. It wasn't a question of cooking. It's definitely not cooking.
But why is it no lot then? I don't understand.
If you take something, let's say snow, and you put it between your hands, and you rub it, and you do it to the heat of your hands, you convert it into water. Are you permitted to drink that water? You're not permitted to do it. You're not permitted to drink the water. That's it's no lot. Because when something's snow, although we all know snow is water or ice, but you've created something that on an obvious level didn't exist. You converted snow to water. That conversion, like on Yom Tov, you're not permitted to strike a match, although kindling is permitted in Yom Tov. But striking a match, that's called creating fire. Rabbinically, you're not permitted to create.
So cooking, if you put a raw egg in a pot in the sun and it becomes a cooked egg, that's not no lot, that's cooking.
No, I don't know. It's just hard. It's the same egg, it's just got harder. Here you take a solid, converting to liquid.
So why is that worse than cooking though? Halachically.
I understand what's not cooking.
In other words, cooking you're allowed to do. You're allowed to.
It's not called cooking.
No, I don't understand. But cooking you're allowed to do.
It's not a derivative of fire. Anything not derivative of fire is not called cooking. But
My
converting something from one thing to another, that's rabbinically, you're not permitted to do this.
So I'm saying if that's rabbinical, I would think you would be, if you're allowed to cook on the sun, and that's deraisa, and you're allowed to, why would it be a rabbinical issue of nola not be allowed?
It's a whole different concept. Cooking is using the source of fire is similar to the Mishnah. Here, it's obvious it's not fire. So why should we not permit it? Here, bringing something to existence which didn't exist a moment ago, that you're not permitted. You created something now which didn't exist a moment ago. It was snow, it was ice, now it's water. Before it was congealed, and now all of a sudden it's liquefied due to your action. Okay, we'll discuss why that is permitted, not permitted. Because there, it's not something which is instantaneous. It's like gradually the congealed dressing or the congealed fat will actually melt in the sun.
So I'm not allowed to leave that salad dressing out at room temperature either, I assume.
We'll see. We'll discuss it. We'll discuss the case of congealed fat on Shabbos, where it's not bishul, is a question of nolad. We'll discuss it here.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, I think we have to Shari Tshuva.
Rabbi, congealed to a solid is not a change in other words, if you take the egg and put it in the sun outside and it's very hot and it becomes a hard boiled egg because of the heat. So going from congealed to solid is not a change. That's considered the same.
Basically the same. It's the same.
Same.
Yeah.
Although it is
A solid to
the raw egg is
no, it has substance to it. It has
Right.
substance.
has substance, so it's considered solid.
Right, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so when the snowball naturally, now you didn't intervene, turns to water, and then you drink the water, that's not nolad.
Okay, there's a difference by creating it.
Right, right.
That's what I said. It's if you rub it between your hands, you've created that water. If the ice naturally melts in the glass, you shouldn't do it. You should not do it. Normally you have ice, it's a liquid, so the melting is not obvious. But to leave ice in the glass because you want water, and there should be accumulation of the melted ice, we'll see, you shouldn't do it. If it's done, it's okay because you didn't actually create it, it happened by itself. Okay.
It's interesting.
Let's see. We're holding Reish Zion. Not Reish Zion, the next one. We're holding 552. We say a problem when you speak Lashon Hara, by speaking Lashon Hara, one of the negative aspects of it is to do tshuva, you have to ask forgiveness from the person you had spoken against. Very often, firstly, you don't remember how many people you spoke about. So to do tshuva properly, you have to ask forgiveness for every one of those people. In addition, even if you remember who you spoke about, a person very often is very hesitant to inform that person, by the way, I said something negative about you. Because Lashon Hara is normally spoken behind the person's back. So now you have to reveal to that person, by the way, I did something negative to you, which you're unaware of. This is a type of mako. It's a blow which is not known to the victim. Like, what do you gain? Lashon Hara, this deceptive tongue. It's like the arrows of a archer, which are sharp arrows. Okay, Nimshal Lashon Hara lechetz. Lashon Hara is destructive like an arrow. It pierces. Person shoots arrows very often. The arrow actually meets its target, which is human being. You shoot an arrow into a crowd. Maybe the arrow will victimize person, maybe not. You speak, you know who you spoke about. Person speaks about a community, as I said, the Chafetz Chaim says. The people who come from a certain community, they're not hospitable, which is a criticism. As a result of that, now you have to ask Mechila for every person in that community. But the person that says, I didn't speak about anybody specific, doesn't make a difference. He spoke about that community. And he gives the example. Person goes to a certain community and he expected a certain degree of hospitality. And he went there to that shul. Nobody even said the Good Shabbos. Nobody invited him for a meal. Nobody was concerned about his existence. These people in that shul, they had corrupted quality characteristics. You spoke Lashon Hara about every member of that shul. Because you spoke about that shul, and you identified that shul. You're in violation of Lashon Hara. Okay.
Rabbi, what happens if you say Lashon Hara about someone who's passed away already?
Rabbinically, you're not permitted.
No, I'm saying you tell a story or something like that about an incident, okay, and it turns out to be Lashon Hara. Obviously, how do you get forgiveness from the person who passed away? Is there a way to do that, or you just,
No, yeah, there is a way.
I mean, you have to take
You
a
have to
communion
go,
or something, go to the kever, or
you have to go to the kever.
wow.
I'm not sure. I mean, it depends how, very often when you speak Lashon Hara about a person, there's a ripple effect to the family also.
Uh-huh.
Speak about a certain person that he was dishonest, and he has children, he has a family. So in a way, you disgrace the family also. It's not only you disgrace that person. Unless the person was a Russia. If the person who died was a Russia,
If it was public, if it was
permitted.
known, then it's a different story, right?
Yeah, okay.
Right.
Yeah, let's see the
Well,
Mishnah.
Rabbi, though, if a rabbi of a shul says Lashon Hara about an entire community,
Why
and
anybody. There's nothing-
anybody, whatever. So why what would be? Wouldn't he be able to publicly say, I said Lashon Hara against this community? Wouldn't that be enough? Yeah, we'd have to go individually.
You have to ask each of the people who are affected negatively, you have to ask forgiveness for every one of them.
But he didn't direct it at an individual. He directed it at a community.
All out of that statement, you victimize the whole community. So anybody who comes from that community now is classified as a person who has no concern for any other person other than themselves. Okay.
Rabbi, it's
Okay, I
interesting.
would like to start the Gemara.
Okay, I'll say it later.
Let's see the Mishnah. We're holding Mishnah and Gites. We're speaking about Yom Tiv, Ochel Nefesh is permitted. Any food-related activity is permitted. Okay? So now, if you want to slaughter an animal on Yom Tiv, you're permitted. Why? Because the value of slaughtering is, now the meat is available to you. What about if you have a shlomim, peace offering? A shlomim is eaten by the one who brings it, and is also eaten by the Kohanim. The Kohen receives his portion, and the vast majority of meat is eaten by the one who brings it, or anybody who he invites to partake of that. Are you permitted to bring a shlomim on Yom Tiv? Seemingly, it would be permitted. It's ochel nefesh. But there's the two types of shlomim. On Yom Tiv, you have an obligation to bring a chagiga. A chagiga is a personal offering. And the Torah says, you must bring the chagiga on Yom Tiv. The Gemara says in Yuma, a communal offering you bring on Shabbos. On Yom Tiv. Why? Because the Torah says, b'moado. Since the Torah says that offering has to be brought in its proper time, regardless of what it is, b'moado, and it's proper, even b'Shabbos. Because that's called kavua zman. Since the Torah says, and it must be brought on that day, you bring it. But it's Shabbos, it doesn't make a difference. The Torah says you bring it. A personal offering, the Torah never says you bring a personal offering on Shabbos. Therefore, if you bring a personal offering on Shabbos, it's a violation of the Shabbos. Torah doesn't allow you to bring that offering. Now, shlomim, let's say a person makes a vow, I'm going to bring a shlomim, and he consecrates an animal, and he wants to bring that shlomim on Yom Tiv. Is he permitted? The Gemara is going to differentiate between whether it's the shlomim of the Yom Tiv, which is called the chagiga, or it's an ordinary shlomim that you consecrated due to a vow that you had made. That shlomim you're not able to bring. What's the difference? Why? I mean, it's ochel nefesh. Just as the non-consecrated animal, when you slaughter it, it's permitted, it's ochel nefesh, because the meat is going to be eaten by whoever participates. Also, when you bring a shlomim, same thing. It's the same benefit, except there's certain limitations. A person's contaminated, he's not permitted, but yet people who are not contaminated, they'll satisfy their ochel nefesh needs, their food needs, but yet it's not permitted. What's the difference? A nedarim and nedava say create miyom tiv. A neder or a nedava, a voluntary korban, you cannot bring it on yom tiv. But a chagiga, although it's also shlomim, you can't bring it on yom tiv. But why not? It's ochel nefesh. What's the difference? Okay. So we had a Tosas and Shabbos that explains it this way. When you slaughter a non-consecrated animal, what is the value of the slaughtering? Torah says you're not permitted to eat meat unless it's ritually slaughtered. So the act of killing is for the sake to accommodate your food needs. That's why you're slaughtering. When you slaughter a shlomim that you had consecrated, let's say, which is unrelated to Yom Tov, and now you want to slaughter that shlom. Why are you slaughtering the shlomim? To provide meat for you? No. You're slaughtering the shlomim, doing the ritual, which is done by the Kohen, the slaughtering and all the other various components of what that avod is, because the Torah says that when you bring a shlomim, that's what you must do. The Torah says, when you do the slaughtering, after you slaughter, you're obligated to eat the meat. But what is the objective? What's the value of the slaughtering? The value of the slaughtering is not to eat the meat. That's just a byproduct of doing the avodah. I'll give you an example. What's the halacha? A person slaughters an animal, a shlomim, during the year, and they sprinkle the blood, and now the meat becomes contaminated, and nobody can eat the meat. What do? Torah says you must burn it. Does the person have kapara, atonement, because the meat was not eaten, but the blood was sprinkled? You have full atonement. Because kapara is bedam. The atonement comes about due to the activity of the Kohen. The eating is only a byproduct. As a result of that, when you slaughter a shlomim, which is not related to the Yom Tov, is that act of slaughtering an act of ochel nefesh or not an act? It's not an act. That's called Lashem. The slaughtering is due because you're doing it for the sake of God. That you're a beneficiary, that's a side benefit. When you slaughter an animal which is non-consecrated, what we call behemoth chulin, what is the value of that slaughtering? The slaughtering is to provide for your physical needs. That's lochem. Lochem, you're permitted. That's the difference between the shlomim that you consecrated before Yom Tiv, which is unrelated to Yom Tiv, and the chulin animal, the non-consecrated animal, when you slaughter it, because the act of slaughtering the malacha is for ochel nefesh. That's how Tosas differentiates in Shabbos. It's a clear differentiation. Everybody hear it. David. Okay? So that's what we're going to discuss here. Now, the chagiga, which the Torah says you must bring on Yom Tiv, that's how you celebrate the Yom Tiv. Chagiga, chogeg, your celebration, that is due to the Yom Tiv. Chagiga, even Beis Shammai is in agreement, you bring that chagiga, because that's the obligation of the day. Torah says you must bring it on Yom Tiv. What about the Olas Riyah? Every Jew has an obligation. It says that you must come to the Lo Yiro Ponei Rekom. You should not see by countenance and come empty-handed. You must bring burnt offering. It's called Olas Riyah, the burnt offering when you come to the sanctuary on Yom Tov. That Ola, it's a burnt offering. There's no human benefit from that, right? It's totally consumed. That's why it's called an Ola. It's a burnt offering. Beis Hillel's of the opinion, just as you're permitted to bring the Chagiga, of course it's the korban of the day, the Ola, although there's no benefit to the person, you also bring it. Because the Torah says, Lo Yiraponei Rekom, you must come, you can't come empty-handed. So that's the overriding factor. Beis Shammai says no. It says Chagiga, yes. Olas Riyah, which there's no benefit to you, that's not. We'll see it in a moment. Beis Shammai says the Chagiga you bring on Yom Tiv, the Ola you don't bring on Yom Tiv. Beis Hillel says not only do you bring the Chagiga on Yom Tiv, but you also bring the Olas Riyah, because that's called Kavuas Man. That's you're supposed to bring that on Yom Tiv. Okay, just giving you a little overview of what we're going to deal with.
Right, just a quick understanding. So, for example, on Pesach we bring the Korban Pesach, and on Sukkot we bring all these korbanos every single day.
Wait. Those are communal offerings. Those are communal offerings. The bulls they brought, those were communal offerings. Every day you have to bring those korbanos.
The lambs as well.
By bringing the Talmud every day you bring it on Shabbos morning.
So
Korban, the Musaf Shabbos. These are communal offerings.
I see. So the Chagiga is a personal offering?
Personal offering, but nevertheless you bring it because Torah says you must bring it.
So you bring it on Pesach as well?
Yes, yes. Besides the Korban Pesach, you bring
And when do you do this? When do you bring the chagiga?
the first day Yom Tov. You slaughter it on Yom Tov.
So in each chag, each yontif, we bring a chagiga.
Right.
Besides all the korbanos, other korbanos that we bring.
The other korbanos you bring are communal korbanos. Those are brought by the Beis Hamikdash brings them. The Musaf. That's purchased from the Matzah Shekel. The opening korban and the closing korban, that's called the Tamid, that's purchased from the Matzah Shekel. Chagiga is purchased from each person's personal money. He buys the animal and brings it as a
And the chagiga is only brought once during the whole yontif, correct?
You only have English once during Yom Tov.
Okay.
The mitzvah to eat meat during Yom Tov, sacrificial meat, but you only have to bring one korban, which is called chagiga, during Yom.
Was that chagiga per family?
No, every Jew has to bring it.
Wow.
Every Jew?
Every male Jew.
That's a lot. That's a lot of people bringing korbanos on yontif, Rabbi.
Yes, yes.
I mean, it's like miraculous that the Kohanim could do that.
Yeah.
Hey, that's the reason why during the year, there's a rotation system. On Yom Tov, everybody was actually working. Every Kohen from all the families actually officiated during Yom Tov.
Gotta be, for sure.
Yeah,
Rabbi, isn't the egg on the Seder plate the Chagiga offering?
it represents the Chagiga.
Right, represents. And
Okay, let's see the Mishnah. Now, towards the end of Be'ah, there's a Mishnah, you're not permitted to ride on an animal. Right? Riding an animal, you're not permitted. Rabbinically. Why? Because we say, Chayno Seisatzmo. It's a rabbinic provision, because since your weight is on the animal, you're not permitted to ride the animal rabbinically. Now, what about when you bring a chagiga, you must do smicha. The one who brings it must lean on the animal and put his whole weight on the animal when he leans. It's not just touching the animal. You must lean. That your weight is weighing down on the animal. Normally, it should not be permitted. Why? Because what? It should be a shvus. It has a semblance of riding an animal. So we'll see in a moment, Beis Shammai is of the opinion, when you bring the chagiga, you bring the chagiga, but you don't do smicha. But since smicha entails weighing your weight on the animal, which is a semblance of riding an animal, rabbinically we don't allow it. So what do? I mean, it's not ma'akiv. If you don't do smicha on the chagiga, so he says, you do the smicha before Yom Tov on the animal, and you bring the animal on Yom Tov. So weighing down the animal, which has a semblance of riding the animal, you're not doing that on Yom Tov. Hillel says no, that just as you bring the chagiga, you probably do smicha also. On Yom Tov, you do smicha. And we're not concerned that it's going to be confused with what? With riding an animal. That's another argument between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Let's see. Beis Shammai omrim, Beivin shlomim vein somch me'aleim. You bring the peace offering, and you don't lean on the animal. Avo lo olos, but to bring a burnt offering, although it's the burnt offering of the Yom Tov, that one does not bring. Beis Hillel omrim mevin shlomim ve'olos. No, on Yom Tov you can bring the shlomim, and you can bring olos. You can bring the burnt offering, v'somchem, and you lean on them as you lean on any korban throughout the year. And we're not concerned it's going to be confused with what? With riding an animal. The Torah says that's what you're supposed to. Why? Because you have no choice. We're going to see there's an argument when you do smicha. Does the smicha have to be prior to the shechita, or you can do the smicha at one time and then you do the slaughtering afterwards? So according to Beis Shammai, the smicha can be done before Yom Tov, and you do the actual slaughtering of the chagig on Yom Tov. Beis Hillel says no. The smicha has no value unless it's immediately right before the shechita. So doing the smicha before Yom Tov is not going to help you any. So if the Torah says you must bring the chagiga, that means chagiga means together with the leaning on it. Therefore, the rabbinic prohibition of riding an animal cannot interfere with the fulfillment of what? To bring the chagiga for that reason. So since chagiga entails leaning it and weighing your weight on it, therefore you do it on Yom Tov. That's Beis Hillel. Okay. So now we're going to see there's going to be a machlokas amoroim. When it says in the Mishnah shlomim, is shlomim only means specifically the chagiga, or shlom means even the durum, the dogos. Even a person that consecrated shlom before Yom Tov, even that he's able to bring. So we can see, ultimately it's going to be machlokas tanoim, but the way we ruled, as Ulu explains the Mishnah, it's only the shlomim is the shlomim of the chagiga. But a person who had a shlomim before Yom Tov, which is unrelated to the Yom Tov, although you're permitted to eat the meat, you're not permitted to bring it on Yom Tov. Because that's gavoa. Mor says lochem, the inference is for you, but not for God. Okay, let's see. Omer Ulo. Machlokes b'shami chagiga. When the Mishnah says everybody concurs, you can bring the shlomim, it's not an ordinary shlomim, it's the shlomim through which you celebrate the Yom Tov. Lismoch. Excuse me, Mavi and Shlomi, b'shami chagiga, lismoch. The machlokes is only, do you lean on the chagiga, don't lean on the chagiga. Bringing the chagiga, even Mishami says you bring the chagiga. But lismoch, do you lean on it? That's what Mishami is taking issue with Beis Hillel. V'olas riyo likoriv. But they were arguing regarding the burnt offering you bring on behalf of Yom Tov. Do you bring that or not? Beis Hillel says yes. Mishami says definitely not. You bring it on Chol HaMoed. You do not bring it on Yom Tov. The Mishami savi chagoso so chag l'Hashem. Torah says you must celebrate it as a chag l'Hashem. Chagiga ein olas rilo. The offering that you actually eat, you partake of, that yes, but olas rio, the burnt offering, when you come to visit the Temple Mount, the sanctuary, that not. That's Beishamim. Bisilomer, no. Savri, no. Lashem. Kol Lashem. Anything which is for God, if it's related directly to the Yom Tiv, you bring it. Although there's no physical participation in eating, consumption. Avul Dorm and Dovos. But let's say the basis for that shlomim, it was due to a vow, or it was voluntary korban that he had brought, but it's unrelated to the Yom Tiv. Divrei Hakol Ein Kriv Yom Tiv. Everybody concurs that shlomim, although it's the same eating component, you're not permitted to bring it, as we explained. V'chein Omer Ravad Bar Avo. Ravad Bar Avo concurs with Ulo. Nadar and Dovos Ein Kriv Yom Tiv. A neder and a nedava cannot be brought on Yom Tov. Okay, so Ula and Ravad Barava, they're interpreting the Mishnah when it says shlomim you do bring. It's specifically speaking of shami chagiga. The shlomim to celebrate the Yom Tov, so it was consecrated for the Yom Tov, but it was not consecrated for the Yom Tov. You want to bring that shlomim, cannot be brought on Yom Tov. Okay.
I mean, Rabbi, it's interesting that there's such a distinction between when something's done in the context of sibor versus personal. We don't, I mean, right? I mean, sibor, so many karbanos are permitted, and personal, it's very selective. Yet the same halachas are involved in each.
Why do you bring a korban sibor? This is what I started the discussion. The Torah says, whenever it says moado,
right,
it must be brought in its time. Moado, the inference is afilu b'Shabbos. Even though it's Shabbos, it must be brought on that day. You have no choice. A personal korban doesn't have to be brought on Shabbos. You can bring a personal korban at any time. It's not related to that particular moment. Chagiga is moado. You must bring that. The Torah says you bring that on Yom Tov. Therefore, that supersedes the Yom Tov, because that's what you do. But the Dharma and Dov is an ordinary shlomim, which is unrelated to the Yom Tov. It's unrelated to the Yom Tov. Therefore, that's not an overriding factor. That's called Lashem. Lochem v'lo gavoa. For you do, but not for God. Okay? So it's very basic. Meisvei. So we're now asking a question from a brisa, which indicates that shlomim, even shalmei chagiga, you're permitted to bring on Yom Tiv. Ula and Ravad Bar says no. When it says shlomim, the Mishnah means specifically shalmei chagiga. Meisvei, Omar Rav Shimon al-Lozer, Rav Shimon al-Lozer Zatano, lo nechve shalmei b'silel al olo she'edu shel Yom Tiv. They're not arguing if the ola is not the olas riyah. They're not arguing that. She'edu kreig b'Yom Tiv. Even Beisil agrees, an ordinary ola definitely you don't bring on Yom Tiv. Al bala shlomim she'en shel Yom Tiv, she'kreig b'Yom Tiv. And the shlamim, which is a chagigo, everybody agrees, you bring it on Yom Tov. Alman nechluka, what are they arguing? Al ola shishal Yom Tov. The ola, which is consecrated specifically for Yom Tov, Beis Hillel says yes, Beis Shammai says no. Al shlom she'enu shal Yom Tov. And the shlamim, which is not due to the Yom Tov, it's a shlamim that you had made a vow or consecrated during the year. Shebeis Shammai omrim lo yovi. Beis Shammai says you can't bring. Okay? Well, Beis Hillel omrim yovi. Beis Hillel says you can't bring it. Even though the shlamim was not consecrated for Yom Tiv, but since factually you're able to have benefit from the food aspect of it, you bring it. It's no different than the chagiga. So it's a problem. So this is a refutation on Ula and Ravad Barab's interpretation of the Mishnah, because they say when it says shlam in the Mishnah, it's only shalmi chagiga, but if it's an ordinary shlamim, which is unrelated to Yom Tov, you're not. And here Reb Shimon Elazar, who's a Tana, is explaining that even the shalmei nadar medavos, Beis Hillel says you bring it. So seemingly it's refuted. Okay, on that the Gemara says tritz. He says you have to read now the Gemara do some alteration in the brisa. Don't read the brisa as it reads, but we're going to alter the brisa a little bit. Tritz ve'mochi omer Reb Shimon Elazar lo nechli sham yisile la ola ushlamim she'enu shel yom tov she'en krevim yom tov. The brisa has to be altered, and you have to read it that not only the ola, which is not the ola of yom tov, you don't bring, even the shlamim, which is not yom tov, you don't bring. Well, shlom shel yom tov, but if the shlamim of yom tov, which is the chagiga, she'krevim yom tov, that you do bring. Everybody agrees you bring that. Alman nechluku. So where's the argument? Al ola she shel yom tov. The ola suriya, which is consecrated specific for the yom tov, should be Shammai omrim lo yovi. Beis Shammai says that you do not bring. Or Beis Hillel omrim yovi. But to be the way we reconcile, it's not a reconciliation. We're saying you have to alter the language of the brisa, because the way it reads, it's a refutation. They said it's being stated incorrectly. So Rav Yosef says, you know what you did? Because you had a problem, you altered the brisa. But we find this issue was a machlokes tanoim, so there's no need to alter the brisa. There's no need. Rav Yosef Omar tanoi shaklis mi'alma. He says, what do you alter in brisa? We have other tanoim, which each one decides this issue. Whether an ordinary shlamim throughout the year, could you bring it on Yom Tov? Could you not bring it on Yom Tov? So therefore, this is not an approach to alter a brisa if we're able to attribute to a machlokes tanoim. That's what Rav Yosef is saying. Is everybody is it clear so far? The Gemara, Mark. Okay. The tanoi, it's machlokes tanoim. The Tanya, shlomim haboy machmas Yom Tov. Shlomim, they're consecrated for the sake of Yom Tov, which is what we call the chagigo. Beis Shammai omrim somich aleim mer Yom Tov. When do you do the smicha? To do smicha on Yom Tov, since it has a semblance of writing, rabbinically, we don't allow you to do on Yom Tov. So you do this leading before Yom Tov, v'shoktem b'Yom Tov, and you slaughter it on Yom Tov. Beis Hillel omrim now, just as you're allowed to bring the animal on Yom Tov, the chagigo, somich aleim b'Yom Tov, because Beis Hillel holds the smicha prior to Yom Tov is not a valid smicha. The smicha and the shchita, one has to be juxtaposed to the other. Okay? For shoktim Yom Tov. So you lean on Yom Tov, the chagiga, and you slaughter it on Yom Tov. Avol. Nadar medovos. But if it's an ordinary vow or a consecrated animal which is unrelated to Yom Tov, Divri Yaakov ain't created Yom Tov. Everybody concurs you do not bring it. So quoting the brisa, that Tana is of the opinion exactly what Ula and Ravad Barabba said. If it's Yom Tov related, you bring it. It's not Yom Tov related, you're not permitted to bring it. Okay? So Rav Yosef's answering, it said machlokes tanoim. So therefore the price of Shimon Loz is not a refutation on Ula and Ravad Barabba. That's what he's answering. But it's interesting. The way we quoted Tosas and Shabbos, the difference between bringing slaughtering a non-consecrated animal and slaughtering a consecrated animal. That differentiation seems to be problematic for this opinion. When you slaughter a chulin, an animal that's not consecrated, why are you doing the melacha? You're doing the melacha to provide meat for yourself. When you slaughter a shlomim, why are you doing the slaughtering? Because there's a mitzvah to slaughter and do the avoda in a consecrated animal. It's not for the sake of eating. Eating is only a byproduct. So if that's the case, it's not ochel nefesh. That's called lashem. I mean, logically speaking, the Dharm Davish you should not be able to bring on Yom Tov, even though it's maybe a shlomim, according to what Tosas differentiated between a behemoth chulin, a non-consecrated animal, and a consecrated animal. But yet, there is an opinion, we're citing now, Rav Shimon Loza says, no, even an ordinary shlomim, you can bring on Yom Tov because the byproduct is sufficient because you're able to partake of it. Because that is a derivative of what? Of the slaughtering. Although that's not the primary reason why you're slaughtering. That's still called lochem. Any comments? Okay. So we're saying we have machlokes tanoim here. Our Mishnah is going according to the way Ula and Ravad have interpreted it. When it says shlomim, it's specifically shalmei chagigo. Rav Shimon Lo says no. They're even arguing an ordinary shlomim. V'hani tanoi kani tanoi. And these tanoim, we find other tanoim, they're arguing the same issue. The Tanya. Now, you know, in Shul, Erev Pesach, every day we say Mizvah L'Soda. Right after we finish the Hodu, before we say Yechvod, we say Mizvah L'Soda. A Toda, what is a Toda? A Toda, when you bring a Toda, you have a sheep, and in addition to the sheep, you bring 40 loaves of bread. 30 loaves of matzah are not chametz, 10 of the 40 are chametz. So since, if you bring a Toda, let's say Erev Pesach, we've got a problem. Because after Chatzos, you're not permitted to eat 10 of those 40 loaves. So since ultimately you're going to have to burn the Toda, the korban that normally you're permitted to eat, as a result of that, Torah said, rabbinic, we say you don't bring it here. Erev Pesach, you don't bring the Toda. Because you bring in the Toda, Erev Pesach, you're going to cause the korban is going to have to be, part of the korban is going to have to be burnt before its expiration time. Therefore, Mizvah L'Soda, Erev Pesach, we don't say in Shul. And therefore, it says here, if a person in the Talmud of Beis Hamikdash, a person would want to bring his korban Toda, Erev Pesach, he couldn't bring it. Because 10 of the loaves couldn't be eaten, they'd have to be burnt, therefore one doesn't bring the Toda. Okay? Eimevi and Toda ber Chag HaMatzos. On Yom Tov for sure. Pesach, definitely you don't bring the Toda. The Chometz Shebo, because the Chometz, 10 of the 40 loaves are Chometz. Therefore one doesn't bring the Toda on Pesach. The Lobat Seres. You don't bring, on Shavuos, you don't bring the Toda either. Shavuos is one day Yom Tov. And Toda is what? Is a Shlomim. It's a Shlomim which is unrelated to the Yom Tov. That's like the Nedar and the Davos. Neishu Yom Tov. One doesn't bring a non-obligatory korban on Yom Tov. Avo maybe Odom Todosom Chag HaSukkos. But on Sukkos you can bring your Toda. Why? You have Chol HaMoed. Although you don't bring the Toda on Yom Tov, but you bring the Toda on Chol HaMoed. Chol HaMoed you're permitted. And Chometz is not an issue on Chol HaMoed Sukkos. That's the Tanakama. So Toda, Pesach not because of Chometz, even on Chol HaMoed. Shavuos not because it's a private korban, which is unrelated to the Yom Tov, one doesn't bring it. And Sukkos, because you have Chol HaMoed, you do bring it. Not on Yom Tov, but on Chol HaMoed of Sukkos. Reb Shimon Omer, no. Reb Shimon says, Harehu Omer, the Torah when it speaks about the three festivals is B'Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaShavuos, Chag HaSukkos. What's the Torah saying? The Torah previously speaks about 3 times a year and speaks about what the three. Then the Torah repeats again. What do we speak about? Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaShavuos, Chag HaSukkos. Kol shebo b'Chag HaMatzos. Whenever you're able to bring a Chag HaMatzos, Bo b'chag hashvuos u'b'chag hasukkos. Anything that you permitted, you bring on Pesach, you bring it on Shavuos, and you bring it on Sukkos. Chol shelo bo b'chag hamatzos, something that you don't bring on Pesach. Eino bo b'chag hashvuos b'chag hasukkos. You don't bring the question. What does that mean? If I want to bring a toad, I can't bring it on Pesach. You mean say I don't bring it on Chol Hamoed Sukkos? Why not? I'm the Gemara to explain what this means.
Rabbi, just an explanation. Does this affect saying korbanos for Shachris and for Mincha?
Shachar and Mincha is Tamid. That's a communal offering.
I mean, we say all the korbanos. Should we on Shabbos and on Yom Tov? Should we not say it?
You don't say Mizvah Soda on Yom Tov, right?
Right.
Because on Yom Tov you don't bring a Toda.
But the korbanos, we say all the
Yeah,
korbanos.
which korbanos? Which korbanos do you say?
Ah, okay. Thank you.
You say Tamid. You say Tamid korbanat Tamid Ketoris. You say these are communal korbanos. Rabbi Elazar Rav Shimon Omer, maybe other Todosa b'chag Sukkos. No, you bring the Toda on Sukkos. Yotzi b'chovoso mishum simcha. Besides the mitzvah of bring a chagiga, there's a mitzvah of what? Ein simcha l'bosa v'yayin. You have to eat sacrificial meat. So a person will bring a shalmi simcha. Besides the chagiga, you have to have meat available to you for yourself to eat sacrificial meat. So the toda that you have, that you can bring on Chalamoid Sukkos, that toda you can be yotzei, that meat is sacrificial meat. So the mitzvah of the samachta b'chagecha, that you must rejoice on the holiday by partaking of sacrificial meat, you can use that to fulfill that mitzvah. Mishum simcha. But as the chagiga, you can't use that dual role. Why? Because the halacha is anything which is an obligation, you can't be yotze with something that already consecrated. It has to be specifically consecrated for that purpose. The Toda wasn't consecrated as a chagiga. So Shami Simchut is a mitzvah to eat meat, sacrificial meat, you can be yotze. But that should have that dual value. A chagiga not, because it's only anything which is a chol, which is obligatory, has to be bom and achumen. It has to come only for something that was not consecrated, and you consecrate it specifically for that purpose. Okay? Now the Gemara's go over this brisa. We have a three-way discussion here. Right? Now the question, we said something that's not brought on Pesach, you don't bring on Shavuos and not on Sukkos. So it's an obvious question. Why can't you bring it on Sukkos? The Gemara's asking, you permitted to gather wood with the cut wood for cooking, so I can't bring a toad on Chalamayit. Sukkos, why not? Gemara's going to speak a whole different concept. What's the halacha? The Torah says, if a person has a korban, or he makes a vow to bring a korban, what's the time period you must bring it? You have 3 regalim to bring it. If a person does not bring the korban within 3 regalim, you're in violation of Bal Ta'acher. You've delayed bringing your obligation. Torah gives you 3 regalim to bring it. Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkos. So let's say a person committed himself, made a neder, that he's going to bring a korban before Pesach. Now you have 3 regalim. You have Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkos. Sukkos passes, you're in violation of Bal Ta'acher. You've delayed bringing it. We're going to see in a moment. What about a person made the vow on Shavuos? How many regalim does he have? Does he have 3? He has now, since he made it before Shavuos, Pesach already passed. He has Shavuos, Sukkos, Pesach, or he has 5. Because the Torah says, we discussed in a moment, it has to be Kesidron. If it's before Sukkos, where the order is Pesach, Sukkos, Shavuos, Sukkos, then you have 3. But if it's not in order, because you first made the obligation on Shavuos, you have Shavuos, Pesach, plus another 3. Because it has to be made, the obligation has to begin at the beginning of the cycle. So since it did not begin at the cycle, you have 5 regalim to fulfill that obligation. That's going to be the machlokes tanoim here.
It doesn't have to be brought any of it. It can be brought during any part of the year, right?
Like any part of you can bring it.
Yeah, okay.
But if you delay beyond the last regel, you're in trouble.
Now, if you miss the chagiga on one chag,
No, that can't be made up. Chagig is something else.
that's all, you have to bring it that yantif.
That you have to, that's Ovazman Botol Kabron. The time expired, you can't bring the carbon anymore. We're talking about a vow. I consecrated an ordinary shlom. What's the time period it has to be brought? You can't delay more than 3 regalim. I make a bring a shlom. You didn't even consecrate it yet. You must consecrate and bring it within three regalim. You pass the third one, you're in violation of you've delayed too long. That's Baal Ta'achir. Do not delay to fulfill that obligation.
Rabbi.
So again, person makes a commitment. The Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah to keep tzedakah.
Exactly.
You have 3 regalim, unless you say openly, I'm not going to bring it. You say bli neder. That's what you should say, bli neder. When you give money, besides being in violation of the neder, you're not limited to the 3 regalim. Let's say you make a commitment to a yeshiva. You say, I'm going to pay it out over 5 years. It's not a problem. Because initially, you're not obligated initially to bring it immediately. I'm saying over 5 years, I'm going to pay it out. But let's say a person says, I'm going to pay it immediately, and he delays the payment for 3 regalim. He's in violation of Baal Ta'achir. It's not only korban, even tzedakah, even charity, the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah. Okay? Okay, a little further. We have another few minutes. Amamar, we're reviewing the Brisa. Amy vi told them chagamatzos. They chomit pshita. Says you don't bring chagig on pay on chagamatzos because of chometz. It's understood. You're not permitted to eat chometz. It's not even the consideration that you get 10 or 40 loaves of chometz. Omar Rav Adam Breder Rav Yitzchok. So Rav Adam Breder, son of Rav Yitzchok, the Abi the other say was a Shul Barabo. Hocha Barbo Osa Askino. We're talking about Erev Pesach. When it says you don't bring the Pesach, even Erev Pesach, you don't bring it. Why? Erev Pesach, you eat chometz in the morning. Up to midday, you permit to eat chometz. Uksava emivin kosher beisapsul. Since the time period normally you can eat is the day and the following night, and now because it's Erev Pesach, your time period is cut short because you can't go beyond midday. So it comes out what you're doing is you're causing by consecrating, by bringing the Toda, you're causing the Toda, which normally can be eaten for 24 hours, now it's to be destroyed after 6 hours. You can't consecrate something which ultimately you're going to cause it to be destroyed, to be burnt. So there's a question which is asked. You know something? Get enough people to eat it before midday. Right? Now, there's a famous word by Toda. Normally, a shlomim is 2 days and a night. A Toda is a shlomim, except the eating period, consumption period is 24 hours. Why is it less time? So the Mefarshim explained, Shonim explained, what's Toda? You're giving thanks to Hashem for something happened. You recovered from an illness, you came back from the sea voyage, or whatever it is. So you want to publicize it. So if you have less time to eat it, that means if you don't eat it within 24 hours, it becomes dosa. So you have to invite more people to help you consume it. By inviting more people to consume it, you're publicizing the nest that happened to you, and therefore it's a greater Kiddush Hashem. That's why it's 24 hours rather than 2 days. So the question is like this. The Torah says when you eat kochim, it has to be lemoshcha. Moshcha means you have to eat it in a noble way. What if a person has to little gobble it down? You have to eat it quickly, so you can't even enjoy it. You know, personally, it makes a wedding, costs $50,000, and the caterer says you got an hour. You know, so if I have an hour for the wedding, we'll be in and out of here in an hour, you're not going to be my caterer. Person says, if I have 8 hours, we could celebrate, but it's worth it, 50 grand. But if I have in and out an hour, the Torah says you must eat the kochim in a noble manner. If you limit it to 6, so what's a noble manner? You have 24 hours. But over here, where I'm limited because of chametz, so it comes out you maybe kochim beis apsul. You got to burn it earlier than you normally would. That means you got to just gulp it down. As a result of that, it's not the appropriate manner in which you eat kochim. Therefore, you don't bring it Erev Pesach for that reason. It's called lemoshcha. This is the way my Rashiv Zechariah Nevrocha, that's the way he explained this Gemara of maybe Kochim, the base Absul. Okay.
Wouldn't we similarly have an issue with the carbon Pesach? Here, we have to be clear to finish it.
No, but that's the way it's eaten. First of all, it's a question: is it chatzos or is it till dawn?
Okay.
But that's the halacha. Here, Chagit by Torah says normally you have 24 hours.
Right.
All of a sudden now you're cutting it short. So that means you're eating it quicker than you normally would eat it. Korban Pesach, that you're supposed to eat the Korban Pesach during this period of time. First of all, Korban Pesach, all the participants, you only have to eat a kedaitis. It's not a problem.
Right.
But here, the Toda is an obligation on the one who actually experienced the miracle. So the Torah sets the time period. The Torah says you have more time. And over here, because of the circumstance, you have less time. That becomes a problem.
And when we have a Sudas Hodah, is that like to replicate that? You invite a lot of people to publicize your specific miracle that you want to acknowledge?
Yes, but that's exactly what it is.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, we'll do Rambam. Okay. Do Rambam and Hilchos Tefillah. We left off Perikut Halacha Ches. Misha Tov b'Musag Shomim Mora Geshem. Person forgot to say Mashu Mora Geshem. Though Mora Tol is a Chiddush. Rambam says Mora Tol. Person left out. Let's say in the summertime, people say Mora Tol. Yeah. Choser the Rosh. You have to go back to the beginning. I mean, if with the way we learn the Rambam, it's difficult. The Gemara says that Tal is continuous 24 hours, 12 months a year, this Tal is due. So therefore, the Gemara says, even if you omit saying Morda Tol, you don't have to repeat the Shemon Esrei. I mean, the Rambam seems to be saying, if you leave out Mashu Morda Goshem, because that's seasonal. Therefore, if you leave it out, it's a problem. But Tal, which is continuous throughout 12 months, even if you don't say it, you don't have to acknowledge it because it's a reality. Yet the Rambam says, if you leave out Morda Geshem, which is mush in the winter, and he didn't say Morda Tol, you have to repeat it. Why? I'm looking in the Mefarshim here. 1 second. Ches. So the Kesef Mishnah speaks about this. I mean, you have to say, I mean, the way the Kesef Mishnah is learning what it says, if you live out Moratal, he doesn't mean Moratal by itself. It means the person would say, Mashur, Umorda Goshem, Umordatal. He said all three. What he meant to say, if you leave it out, you don't say the whole statement. But if you leave out Moratal, like I told you, it's an explicit Gemara, you don't have to repeat the Shon Esrei. Okay? No, but then it says, Hiskaratal in a choser. But if you did mention do, you don't. Okay. Let's see, in the summertime, you said Mashumul Goshem, again, it doesn't belong there. If you omit tal, you don't have to repeat it. Why? Because tal is continuous. And you don't have to ask for tal. Tal, the world can't exist unless there's do. the world has to have a certain degree of moisture, and the ongoing dew that falls every day, that cools down the world. The Gemara says that the crosswinds of the world, you always have wind. Why? Because if the winds would not blow, the heat would be so overwhelming, the world would be destroyed. So there's always this cooling mechanism. The cooling mechanism is called winds. You have all the crosswinds. Identically, the Torah says that the verse says you have to have dew continuously. It's based on psukim, because otherwise, if the world wouldn't have that degree of moisture, the world would actually will self-destruct. And therefore, even if you're mital, it's not a problem. Okay, that's what the Rambam concludes here. So right now we're talking about the introduction, when the first brachas of the Shemona Esrei. What about, you said, the brachim Baruch Hashanim? In the winter we say Talmud Motor, right? In the winter we say bracha. Right now in the summer we say bracha. What happens in the summer? In the winter you forgot to say Talmud Motor. You didn't say it in Baruch Hashanim. Do you have to repeat the Shemona Esrei, or you could insert it in Shema Kolenu? You said same bracha, and then you're holding by Shema Kolenu and you insert it there. Do you save the day? I'm going to say the halach is if you insert it there, you don't have to repeat the Shemona Esrei. If you pass it, then you got to repeat the Shemona. You have to go back to the bracha, and if you don't say it at all, you have to repeat Shemona Esrei. But saying Talmud Motor, even if you don't say the Birchas Hashanim, you're able to insert it in Shema Kolenu. If you pass Shema Kolenu, you have to go back to Baruch Hashanim to say it there. If you complete the Shemona Esrei, then you have to repeat the whole Shemona Esrei, because you didn't say Talmud Motor in the winter, which you have to say it in the bracha of Baruch Hashanim. You got it? It's clear. Sounds a little complicated. Not complicated. In the winter, you have to say Talmud Motor in the bracha of Baruch Hashanim. If you didn't say it, you could insert it in Shema Kolenu. If you pass Shema Kolenu, you got to go back, not to Shema Kolenu to insert it. You go back to the bracha of Baruch Hashanim, because that's the appropriate location. If you complete the Shemona Esrei, you didn't say it, then you have to repeat the whole Shemona Esrei. Is it clear, David? It's clear. Ephraim. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.
And Rabbi, just now, let's say it's summer, and you're saying Tame Bracha, and the same thing happened.
You said saying Talmud Motor in Baruch Hashanim?
Yeah. No, you just forgot Tame Bracha. You just forgot it.
So what did you say? You say something. Either you say bracha, say Talmud Motor. Let's say in the summer you said say Talmud Motor in that bracha.
Right.
Yeah, you know what you have to do? And you have to go back and say the bracha over again.
Interesting.
In the winter, you don't have to, because you're able to insert it in Shema Kolenu. But here you have to undo something. It said something inappropriate. Because in the winter, in the summer, you don't say Talmud Motor in the bracha of Baruch Hashanim. So Shema Kolenu is not going to help you on that. There you got to go back and say it correctly. And if you didn't, you have to repeat the Shemona Esrei, because the bracha wasn't said properly. Okay? You know, Rav Moshe Feinstein said, when he gives smicha, Jay, I'm speaking specifically for you. Where's Jay? He's there. He would give smicha, he would have them, they had to learn Orach Chaim. And he would say he has smicha from this siman to that siman. Yeah, let's say there's 6 volumes of the Mishnah Berurah. Says he has smicha that he can rule within the first 3 volumes of the Mishnah Berurah. Specifically. So Jay, you know, you got smicha, up in Monsey or whatever it is. So now that you're learning these halachas, we'll add, make an addendum to the smicha. We're expanding your horizon of halacha now.
Oh yeah. David got smicha. The only thing I got is I don't know.
Yeah, we talked about smicha just now. You bring a korban, you do smicha. Okay.
Exactly.
Samach Yodo Rosh Hapor. Okay.
Rabbi, there is a smicha and there is a blanket. Which one you mean?
Okay. Now you know what Israeli humor is. Okay. Now you know why. Now you know why Mordechai didn't make it as a comedian. It's not much to laugh at. Okay. Okay. It's the winter. He's supposed to say Saint Talmud Motor, and he forgot. In Niskar, Kodem Shema Kolenu. If you remembered before you say Shema Kolenu, Shol as a Shema Kolenu Tefillah. You insert in Shema Kolenu, as we just said. Vim. What about he passed it? He passed Shema Kolenu. He said Shema Tefillah. Now you have to go back and say it correctly in its proper location. Let's say he didn't make the correction till he finished the Shemon Esrei. He has to repeat the Shemon Esrei because the bracha that was said before Hashanim was said improperly. He has to go back to the beginning. Okay, exactly verbatim what we just said. That's the way you deal with this issue. Now the new one. Hiskir Yalav Yovo. Person forgot to say Yalav Yovo Rosh Chodesh. In this guy called him Shiashim Tefillah. So he's holding by Sim Shalom. He realized he didn't say Yalav Yovo. Where does it go back to? You go back to Ritzei. Says Ritzei. Inserts Yalav Yovo. Then he says Semzen or Einenu. Okay. So what does he do? Im Niska called him Shiashim Tefillah. So Choz Lavodah. You go back to say Ritzei, and you say it, and then you continue. So let's say you realize you finished Shmon Esrei, you didn't say Yalav Yovo. Chosel Rosh. You have to repeat the Shmon Esrei because it's Rosh Chodesh. Every Shmon Esrei has to have Yalav Yovo. If it did not have it, you have to repeat it. Now, interesting. You know, we say after we finish one essay, you see Baruch Shemal Yisrael Shalom. You say Yulu Rotzim Refi. We don't step out immediately. We say Elokai Nitzol Lishonim Yirah. So there are a number of personal supplications we say. So the Shemon Esrei is not finished till you step out. Even though you said in Baruch Shemal Yisrael Shalom, since you're still in the middle of the supplications, you still could go back. Once you step out, it's over. If you said the second Yulu Rotzo, once you said the second Yulu Rotzo, you finished your Shemon Esrei. You have to go back. But if it's before the second Yulu Rotzo, where you're still saying the Bakoshes, although it's not an integral part of Shemon Esrei, you're still engaged. Therefore, you still can go back to Ritzei and insert the Yalav Yovo. Okay, we're going to stop here. Daf Yomi is at 9:30. Everybody be well.